All righty, we are recording.
Okay, thank you. So it is 1 p.m. on Monday, August 11th. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board, and I am Janet Hurley, the chair, and I'll ask board members to introduce themselves as I see them on screen here. Sarah.
Sarah Had, board member present.
Brooke.
Brooke Dingledine, board member present. And I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty hearing, so I'm going to take off my my camera and see if I can reconnect on my other Wi-Fi.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
And Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan, board member present.
And Alex is away camping, so Alex Weinhagen will not be present today. Brooke, are you still with us? Just want to make sure she's still connected. Brooke, can you hear? Maybe give her a minute. Anyone else have any agenda updates, Sarah or Kirsten? No? Okay. All right, we've lost Brooke momentarily. Let's see if we can get her back. There she is. Brooke, can you hear?
Much better, thank you. Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt things.
No, that's okay. You have no agenda updates, do you?
No. All
Okay.
set, thanks.
Opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. Do we have any public comments to take from anyone in attendance? Okay, I don't see anybody raising a hand or speaking up, so I'm going to keep going. Item D is our consent agenda, review and approval of the minutes from July 21st, July 22nd, and July 24th. Maddie, do you want to put those up again on screen?
Yeah,
And
do we need a motion?
yeah, I was just going to ask if there's a motion on the minutes. Sarah.
I'll make a motion to approve all. I'll second.
Thank you, Brooke. You beat Kirsten to it. And there had been some earlier suggested edits. It looks like Maddie has encompassed those here. Were there any others from? And actually, should the motion include allowing these edits?
With corrections.
Yes.
I'm happy to amend the motion to include the edits.
Thank you.
Happy to
Brooke, are you-
second the amendment.
Okay, great.
I'll just scroll and you can see the suggested changes
In red, yep.
as I go.
Can I just quickly confirm something?
Sure.
That the changes we're seeing as displayed by Maddie correspond to the ones for which we received an email.
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure it's a sum total. Thank you.
Maddie,
Yeah.
it looks like the B for board is missing. The little b is crossed out, but a capital B has not been replaced on the third to the last line there.
Here?
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, most of these were just sort of typographical.
Yeah.
Forgot a few ons, forgot a few dates,
Yep.
forgot some last names. This one just kind of reordered the sentence in the paragraph.
Hmm.
This one just removed the regional planning application because item F discussed all of that.
Yep.
I think that was it. Sorry for the
It's okay.
scrolling. Yes, I believe
Hmm.
that was the final
Change.
edit for the 21st.
Okay. Great. 22nd.
Okay, bear with me. I'm just sharing
Sure, no
windows.
problem.
So I gotta
Yep.
switcheroo here. Okay, 22nd. So the 22nd was the appeals study focus. So the
Yep.
substantive content is in the summary that Brooke and Alex Pastor
provided.
worked on. So
Got it.
this is again mostly just sort of typographical. I forgot the date and the on. And I believe that is it for these.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Sure. And then let me pull up the 24th. There we go. Can't remember.
Were there any? I can't remember either.
I think it was just that I think the template is just missing the word on in the opportunity for public comments
Okay.
on non-agenda items, which I have
Got it.
updated in our template, so that shouldn't be an issue moving forward. But I believe that was the only
Okay.
suggested edit to this one as well, but I'll just get to the bottom.
Yeah. Looks like it.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the 24th.
Okay. Any further discussion on these sets of minutes? I see shaking heads all around. So all those in favor of approving these minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And that is unanimous with one absent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so operations, budget, and legislative updates. Well, our fearless executive director is in the Midwest, so we are forging ahead without him. I don't have any particular operational updates. And we just began speaking about the fiscal year 27 budget midweek last week and don't really have much to report there yet. So is there anything in our current budget or anything, Rachel, that you think needs an update?
No, I'll just say that the intent is really to have kind of some small working group meetings throughout the month of August, and Janet and Sarah have been a part of those, as well as Pete, to kind of define some changes that we're needing to plan for in fiscal year 27. There's always changes that happen every year and different all the time, but crowdsourcing some information from all of those knowledgeable individuals. And once we have a draft that's in a more finalized format, we will bring it to the board in public meeting for review of the draft. So I expect that will happen sometime in early to mid-September, that you will be taking that up as a board. Any questions around that, or? Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
For legislative updates, we don't really have any updates, except I keep telling people at our meetings that if you see that there are legislative fixes as we power through our Act 181 tasks, please forward those to Pete, who will be compiling them. Of course, he's gone for the next few weeks, but we want to have, we want to have that compiled and ready to go before the next legislative session. And actually, we would like to discuss it in open meeting as well at some point before the legislative session. So. Okay. Moving along to item F, studies and reports, process and updates. So we are working on some forms for the regional plan application processes that we hope to get out in front of the RPCs soon. Application form and a comment form that we also hope to get out in front of our agency partners in particular. As we've noted before, we really want to front load the pre-application phase for getting as many comments as possible so that the RPCs can respond to those comments before they adopt. The comment form will help, I think, the board. If we can get everybody to use the comment form, it will help us in terms of organizing our response. And that written response will help us during the final phase when we issue a determination of compliance. We have very little time after the close of the hearing that we must hold to issue that determination. So we really are seeing this pre-application phase as very important to set the stage for the final phase of the application process. Brooke, we're having an appeals item, so should I just wait until that for your update?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then Kirsten and Sarah have been talking about the 1 in 10 acre town and list, and I think we also have the road jurisdiction discussion separately. So let's just move on to tier 2 update. Oh, I forgot tier 1A, Sarah.
Happy to tackle both.
Okay.
Tier 1A, I will say it's exciting that we finally have a numbering format, which I asked you in the draft for regional plan. I think the most recent version now has the new numbering format. And so if you'd look at that when you have a chance, Janet, and let me know. But I'd like to take a look at that format that we put a substantial amount of work into and use it for looking at how to plug in tier 1A guidance. So that I think on the website for tier 1A at the end of the week, we updated it with a timeline, recognizing we're a little bit different. We don't have a stakeholders group necessarily with that. We have a January 1st deadline, but it's also contingent that people need to have their flu map adopted in order to apply. So probably a little bit after the first of the year, and sort of going over some of the milestones to get there. That's all very doable. Looking to in September, towards the end of September, bring back something to the board for consideration. So sort of a tight timeline, but hopefully it's something that we can get moving on. So
And using the regional plan application guidance as a guide. So
absolutely.
just make sure, check with me offline to make sure we're talking about the last version of the numbering system, that we're looking at the same one. Okay.
Happy to take on the extension for tier 2 report now. And also have Kirsten jump in. Kirsten and I had a work session and went through the requirements as put into Act 181 for the Tier 2 report. I believe the board considered, so the next item on the agenda is the Tier 3 report that Alex has asked for an extension, or will be asking for extension until September 30th. We think that it's appropriate and prudent to ask for the same, recognizing some of the tie-ins with the Tier 2 report on Tier 3 in terms of taking a look at fragmentation of rural resources, prime ag soil, 9L, and accessory on the farm. So that's a very quick summary, but we will be asking for an extension on the report till September 30th, 2026.
So let's, we've discussed the Tier 3 report extension. And last week we decided that it would be best for us to make a motion or to pass a motion as a board asking for these 2 extensions on each of those 2 items. So I would entertain a motion. Go for it, Kirsten.
I make a motion that the board submit a written request to the legislative contact for both the Tier 3 and Tier 2 reports due under Act 181 until September 30th, 2026. Just a brief mention, I think we had previously discussed September 1st, 26 as a possible date for Tier 3, but I think we're now looking at September 30th, and I think that's, I concur with Sarah. So if that's a sufficient motion, I'll leave it there.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I mean, I guess I would just sort of note for the record, as we've discussed, this is substantive review of, you know, various issues under the Act 181 obligations. And I think we've discussed it will benefit from additional time and
Right.
stakeholder engagement and a public comment opportunity at the end. So,
Yep. Technically, we don't have stakeholders identified for the Tier 2. That is for the Tier 3, but public
Right.
input and, you know, good
Yeah.
scrutiny of the issues is desirable. So more time
Yeah.
will help. We, these were originally due to be submitted in February. And we expect to be reviewing a number of regional plans at that time, as well as all the other implementation work that we're up to. So I think the extensions will be very helpful. All right, any
And just-
further discussion? Go ahead, Kirsten.
Well, maybe just a quick mention that Sarah and I have discussed that we would envision consulting or providing an opportunity for input from the other existing stakeholder groups for Tier 2 and the road construction jurisdiction topic. But not necessarily convening, you know, as you mentioned, a dedicated stakeholder group specifically for those things. So it will likely, the process would likely involve leveraging the existing stakeholder groups that have been otherwise convened for the appeals report and Tier 3 under Act 181, plus some other not, you know, to be identified expected stakeholders.
And public outreach in general,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Okay,
I think we need a second on the motion.
thank you, Brooke.
I think I previously seconded it, but I'm happy to have a second.
Oh, a second.
I didn't want to jump in. I wanted Sarah to do it. She's been working on this, but I wasn't sure if we had.
Right, so I think the AI will tell us that Sarah seconded it. Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Hi.
That is all four of us present, with Alex being absent, Alex Weinhagen. Okay, so let's move on to item G. Update on 1 and 10 acre town list. Sarah and Kirsten, that is your item. I don't know which of you would like to take it from there.
Happy to, oh, Kirsten, I was gonna say I'm happy to take it as, I prepared the memo, but Kirsten has her hand up first, so.
Oh, I was actually, maybe before we get into item G, if it's okay, I just wanted to mention on Wood's products report implementation.
Oh, sure.
That work has been ongoing, does encompass a couple items for the legislature. And I did receive a message from ANR through Billy Coster outlining their interest and range of prioritization for the different 10 action items. And specifically suggesting that, it's felt that it would be beneficial to work together on some of the items. So some of it's explicitly spelled out as part of those report action items that would occur. Other ones, it's more open-ended. So what I think I'll do is I'll forward the message received and maybe we could discuss it at a future meeting.
Okay,
Schedule a
Yeah.
continued discussion of wood products implementation at a future board meeting.
yeah, that
So,
sounds good.
But yes,
Yeah.
Sarah, I'll let you carry on with item G. Thank you.
All right.
Do you
well,
want to share your screen, Sarah, or
Sure.
do you want somebody else to?
No, I'm fine to
Okay,
share, so I'll share the memo that, I generated and is in the packets. I mean, can everybody see that well enough?
yeah, you might zoom in a little.
All right. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I think it was this spring, we had a town apply, I forget which, I apologize, and for a change in status. And the board had a lot of questions at that time as to what the process was. And so Kirsten and I took this on to sort of look into it and what the parameters allowed for. And so I think what we wanted to do is just sort of wrap this back to the board at this point and sort of let you know what we found and what our recommendations are. So Rule 2D governs this and provides the municipality that adopts permit and zoning and subdivision bylaws can ask to have a 1 acre status per 10 BSA section 6001 subsection 3 subsection A subsection 3. So it's not, there are some towns, I believe, that have zoning and subdivision bylaws, but don't necessarily want 1 acre status. So this is a process that they can actually request it and shall file a copy of the ordinance and a certificate of adoption pursuant to 1975 with the district coordinator. All this was included in the packet information, so you can go through and you can sort of double check some of these things. But what I guess the sort of result is we have a form that a municipality can apply for, and on our website we have information about 1 and 10 acre towns. And the form we're recommending be updated because it's a little bit duplicative. You file with us, you file also with ACCD. ACCD has a portal through the Department of Housing and Community Development for bylaws to be uploaded. And so what we're recommending is rather than us keeping and having to store a record of a bylaw, is to send us the link to where this has been uploaded in DHCD's database. Also a good sort of housekeeping and checks and balances is Right, you've adopted zoning bylaw and subdivision regs. Make sure that you file them as you're required to under 24 VSA with DHCD and provide a link. So that's the long and the short of it. I think the sort of thing is in the future when we go through and do some house cleaning, or keeping with the rules, is we could clarify Rule 2D to say this specifically is providing a link, and also update who the form is submitted to. I believe that Rule 2D now says perhaps district coordinators, whereas the forum has more executive director. Janet, you have a question?
Yeah, I think there are two questions here, or two issues, I should say. One is when a town adopts both zoning and subdivision bylaws, but wants to remain a 10-acre town in terms of triggering Act 250. And the other is when a town adopts zoning and subdivision bylaws and wants its status changed on our list to be a 1-acre town. And I think that's what the issue was in the spring, is that a particular town adopted both and wanted to be on the 1-acre list. And Rule 2D doesn't seem to address that at all. So I wonder,
Can I share Rule
and I
2D?
think, what?
Can I share Rule
Yeah,
2D?
sure. Yes, please.
All right, can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
So this is pretty clear that a municipality has to elect to make the change. It's not just,
Yes.
and they elect to make the change by filing with us.
right, they elect to remain a 10-acre town. That's what this is about. And by default, when a town adopts both, it becomes a 1-acre town unless they use this Rule 2D to remain a 10-acre town. So the question is, how do we update our list to reflect that a former 10-acre town has now become a 1-acre town? I think there are two options. When a town adopts both, it can either opt to remain a 10-acre or it automatically receives the 1-acre designation or 1-acre trigger point. So do you see what I'm saying? It looks like Brooke has her hand up and Kirsten on this. Go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, in terms of the definition in the statute of development under 3A and then 3 little i's, it's saying that development means each of the following, and the 3 little i's is that construction of improvements involving more than 1 acre of land within a municipality that has adopted permanent zoning bylaws. If the municipality in which the proposed project is located has elected by ordinance adopted under 24 VSA Chapter 59 to have this jurisdiction apply. So the statute seems to give the authority for like a 2-step process. It's not like an automatic just because you put in zoning. So I do see, but the rule seems very confusing to me in terms of the language. But when I go back to the statute, it appears they have the authority to elect whether or not to become a 10-acre town from a 1-acre town. Follow me?
Yes.
So I got a little confused when I looked at the rule. I wasn't clear that it was perfectly consistent. It's like this shall remain a 10-acre. Because when you're putting in zoning, you're going from being a 1-acre town to a 10-acre town.
So
you're
it's not
you're
just
not-
zoning, it's so many towns have zoning and don't have subdivision. So those are 1 acre, I mean, those are 10-acre towns until they adopt subdivision regulations,
So
at which point they should be recognized as a 1-acre town.
I'm getting confused on the
no,
numbers.
it's backwards.
You're saying it backwards, and the rule, I think,
Yeah.
is actually saying it backwards from the statute. That's why I'm confused.
No, so there are two different issues though. One, a town that doesn't have both zoning and subdivision is a 1-acre town. I'm sorry, I think I did say it wrong. Sorry.
You were saying
So-
it backwards.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So a town that does not have both is a 1-acre town. Many towns have zoning but not subdivision regulations. And they are 1-acre towns, but many of them eventually adopt subdivision regulations, at which point they should become a 10-acre town unless they use this rule to say we'd rather stay a 10-acre town.
1 acre town.
Yeah, but my problem is.
I mean,
that
a 1-acre
they're-
town, sorry.
Yeah, but the rule is written wrong. The rule is written backwards, I think, isn't it? It's saying to remain a 10-acre town, not.
Well,
to
for
become
purpose
a 10
of subdivision,
acre.
for purpose of subdivision, a 10-lot town.
Oh, I missed lot. Okay, thank you
Yeah.
sorry for having the brain.
okay.
fog. Got it. Thanks.
It is still, it's shall remain a 10-lot municipality. Where else do we use the term a 10-lot municipality?
Well, a
It's not
1
in
acre
statute.
town. Yeah.
We either call them 1-acre or 10-acre towns. And the 10-acre towns are the ones that have both subdivision and zoning bylaws. Unless one of those
Yeah.
towns has opted to remain a 1-acre town. So is this 10-lot municipality language used anywhere else for the purposes of subdivision jurisdiction?
I don't know. I'd have to research that, but
Hmm.
I understand what this means as a practical matter.
So,
But do you see
So-
what my issue is? That unless a town opts to remain a 1-acre town, a town with both zoning and subdivision, unless it opts to remain, there are towns that they adopt subdivision after having zoning for decades, and they assume that they are then 10-acre towns.
Yeah.
And we need to update our list. So we ask that they tell us, right? So we're not just asking when they're opting to remain 1-acre towns. We are also asking for them to update us when they become 10-acre towns, having adopted both zoning and subdivision. So, and I think the form can be used for both.
Yes.
correct.
But the
Correct.
form, as it's drafted, doesn't necessarily show that distinction.
So I'm going
Could
to
have a
share
line
what the
saying-
existing form is right now. And this is to request a change. So you could be a little bit more explicit with some of the descriptive language here.
We could have
Yeah.
a line that just says description of change requested.
Yeah,
I
Right,
just wanted to note something to add to what Sarah said as well, because as can be seen on the draft, which Sarah is, or someone is now displaying, I'm guessing that's Sarah. The second checkbox indicates I have uploaded the bylaw and associated forms to DHCD's database as evidenced by the web links provided in one of the following 2 boxes. So the associated forms encompasses not just the bylaws, but also the report that Alex Weinhagen had referred to months ago now in our much earlier discussion of this whole topic. So part of what Sarah and I did when we were discussing this is we looked at the information that the user does provide to DHCD as part of this update to their database. So Act 250 staff or, coordinators who might be involved reviewing this information would have access to, the bylaw and some additional associated information. So I just wanted to kind of refer to that. And we haven't, Sarah and I didn't really land on a definitive place as far as internally within our staff, sort of like operationally what the process would be. I think we talked about having some, further conversation about that, but this is just the externally facing component of it.
I think it makes sense to go to the executive director, but,
So
so it
Well,
sounds
right,
like.
but then he may internally like refer it elsewhere for
Right.
some form of processing review.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So the language that Janet, I wanted to catch it, is in this first sentence, you'd like to see something added here?
No, I would like a box maybe. So in that first checkbox, I duly authorized representative of the town of so-and-so hereby certify that the town has, it says does or does not have duly adopted permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. And the question is, do they want to have 10-acre status or 1-acre status upon that change? So, and if they
Yeah.
don't have, I guess there could be a town that had subdivision bylaws and decides they don't want them anymore. So
Well-
I guess that could make sense in that sense, but
If we added a box in here and it was 1 acre or 10 acre,
yeah,
is that,
maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, sorry.
The change request is,
Yeah, description
to
of
be-
request.
yeah, to go to, to change from 1 to 10 acre, 10 acre to 1 acre.
okay? A lot of box in here,
And it can have a pull down
yes.
that just has 10 acre or 1 acre.
Okay,
So, yeah, if you want to take that and finesse it, I don't know, is Alex Pastor helping you with the form, or
not yet.
are you figuring it out yourself?
Brooke had a
Alright.
question.
Good for you. Brooke?
Yeah, we may have to ask Jenny to put a pin in this and give us a.
Yeah.
But I'm still really confused by Rule 2D, only because. Okay, so I get that this is like where we've done our zoning and subdivision, but we still want to remain a 1 acre town. But what I don't understand is the number 2 thing about shall remain a 10 lot municipality for purposes of subdivision jurisdiction. The reason why I don't understand that is what is the default if you are a 1 acre town? Are you not subject to 10 lot subdivision? I mean, that's in the definition of development and statute.
If you're
Kirsten?
if you're a 1 acre town, then it's 6 or more lots in 5 years. That triggers.
Okay.
If you're a 10-acre town, it's 10 or more
It's
lots.
6 and 10,
5
okay,
years.
that's the
Yeah.
difference. So,
Yeah.
I gotcha, so that
So
they
this is
can
ki-
ask for the increased number of lots, not to trigger it at 6, even though they're
Well,
gonna
to
stay a
just-
1-acre town.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think,
Got it.
I think we need to define 10-acre town, 1-acre town, or actually we should probably call it municipality. And we should define what that means, in the rule.
I
Yeah,
think
the rule
Kirsten and
needs
I,
to be fleshed out, I think, the Rule 2D.
I think both Kirsten and I agree that Rule 2D could use some updating, but I think what we wanted to bring to the board was in the meantime, just cleaning up the form.
Yeah,
Pete Gill spent time before updating that form. It's very useful. It's a good tool, and it is something that towns could use for either. So just some minor modifications to that right now, and also the idea that we could reference the state's existing database. So it would eliminate some duplicity for municipalities. Would be a good first step, but there's another bucket besides the legislative updates, the rule updates that we'll eventually need to get to and cleaning it
Yeah.
up. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
and
a question from Thomas? Oh, sorry, Brooke.
No, I was just gonna say, no, I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I was having some trouble just understanding how it was working, but really helpful. I appreciate it being clarified for me. Thanks.
And I think understandably, because it's not clear, there's incomplete information in the rule. So, Thomas, do you have a comment?
I do have some comments. The first comment I'd like to make is one that developed during the discussion. If the town elects to or decides to remain a 10-acre town, even with both, don't they have
1
to
acre,
provide
yeah.
an ordinance? And I don't see a place on the form for them to provide that ordinance or a link to that ordinance that says they've made that decision. That's something to be worked on. The other things are, I don't see how you can adopt a form until you change the Rule 2D. Rule 2D requires that copies be filed with the board, if I read Rule 2D correctly. And you are trying to, it appears to me, to ignore that Rule 2D, that part of the Rule 2D, and say, well, you can just give us a link and we're not going to require you to file copies as required by our rule. And
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Thomas wasn't done.
I'll
Go
wait
ahead,
for the
Thomas.
response. I've got another point to make, so
Yeah.
if you want to discuss this one first.
Okay, sure. Sarah?
So the form is existing right now and asks for links to the relevant documents, subdivisions, what have you on. So municipalities can utilize this form right now and provide links to the zoning regulations or subdivision regulations on their website. So I think what we're trying to do is just clean up the existing form and have it be linked to the DHCD database, which is archival. And municipal websites can come and go and change links. And so this will at least give us a better archival link to it. So they are providing the information via a link right now and just clarifying. So for better or for worse, that's what we have and what we're working with and what we're trying to improve.
On a rebuttal on that, the existing form, what I believe is the earlier of the two that you sent me, was adopted in the period when there was no board. It appears to have been adopted in early, or created, I won't say adopted, created in early January after the Natural Resources Board ceased to exist and before the Land Use Review Board began. So it's not clear what kind of review that document actually got when it was created. So something to consider.
Yeah,
My-
thanks.
And
Go ahead.
my other point is, neither of the documents, the forms, has a date on it. So it's not clear which one is which. I mean, one says draft, I think, in the title on the link, but, you know, I really encourage you to date all your documents, and as you update them, indicate a new date as they get revised to make it clear to everybody which is which.
Yeah. We can do that in a footer, maybe routinely. Thank you, Thomas.
Would
Kirsten.
also,
Oh, Maddie,
sorry,
go
I would
ahead.
just also flag that when documents are uploaded to the website or documents are updated, the date on the website is also updated. So the draft form that got uploaded last week has the August date, and the form that was uploaded in January has the January date on the website. So that information is captured.
Okay, thank you. Kirsten.
So I think Thomas makes a really good point, and that the form should prescribe that if in these instances where a municipality is requesting an election to remain at the 1 acre status for purpose of Act 250 jurisdiction, it should explicitly state that the user is to file a copy of the ordinance with the request. Like, I think that I agree with
Yeah.
Thomas's,
And-
like what
and
he's
just-
saying.
Just to be clear, that ordinance is that the municipality's legislative body has adopted an ordinance that says, although we have zoning and subdivision bylaws, we want to remain a 1 acre town in terms of Act 250 jurisdiction.
Right, so I think that should be provided.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay for us to receive documents via a link to a web page. I mean, I guess I feel like that's kind of semantics as far as, I mean, we receive documents uploaded to different, I'm blanking on the correct terminology, but people transmit documents different ways, and I think it's perfectly valid for us to receive that content as a link to the DHCD webpage. And I guess I would just kind of lastly note Rule 2D as it's written in my mind, conceptually, like I do think it works. I think it's pretty explicitly defined now, and it's not like I'm not seeing some disconnect between the rule and the process here. Like it could use some cleanup, but I think it's pretty well laid out how this is to occur. And I guess I'm not really understanding what others may be perceiving as sort of like a glaring problem with Rule 2D.
Brooke?
Yeah, I was having trouble understanding it. It was brain cramp. I do think the rule does require a copy to be provided to the district coordinator, and we should comply with that. I don't care whether it's a link or a PDF or whatever. I guess they would send the minutes where they voted the ordinance in and the actual copy of it. And I just don't see that as a burden of duplicative process. I mean, just see the district coordinator on the email kind of thing, I think is more than sufficient. But we should comply with the rule until it's changed or altered.
Any further discussion on Rule 2D and the 1 and 10 acre town list that we maintain? Sarah?
So I think just to get my marching orders correct is I'll make the change to the form to add the box, and also add something asking for some sort of municipal resolution one way or another about opting in, opting out. And look to try and finalize that and work with staff to get that out there to replace our existing form.
And actually, not to throw a little monkey wrench in, Sarah, but I wonder if we can have separate boxes for zoning and subdivision and then unified if they have unified, instead of combining them in one box. Seems like it would be better to, if they're separate, then 2 separate links.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, great.
I had one
thanks.
other thing under this topic before we change topics, but I see
Okay.
Brooke has her hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the wording of 2D talks about, that the municipality, that elects by ordinance to have 1 acre development jurisdiction apply. So I don't think that they need to give some further declaration or anything. It has to be in the ordinance, it appears, unless I'm wrong about my reading of this. So if they do that, they just need to send the ordinance and the, proof that they adopted it at a meeting. I don't think they need to like go further with other positions or declarations.
That's if they're opting to stay at 1 acre. But if they are not doing so and they have just adopted a unified ordinance and now they have both zoning and subdivision, they do need to provide the links to the new bylaws.
Yeah, I'm just saying in terms of Sarah getting information, I mean, asking for the information, it should be already there. We shouldn't have to ask them for like some declaration that that they want it. It looks like it's supposed to be
Right,
elected
it's
by
their
ordinance.
Yes, yeah, I got you.
They
yeah.
want them to have do an extra step that was unnecessary.
Right, right. Kirsten?
Well, so Brooke, in saying that, or would you envision that it would be embedded as content directly within the zoning or subdivision or unified bylaw? So it would be,
No,
it would be a separate ordinance.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. That's what
Yeah,
I was getting at. Like we would, as Tom suggested, ask them to provide a copy of it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Yep.
the municipalities can have zoning, subdivision. Usually those are called bylaws. They can also be called ordinances or they can just be called regulations. And so there's some confusion about bylaws versus ordinance versus whatever. But the kind of ordinance that would have them remain a 1 acre town is the kind of ordinance that does not go through the Title 24 process of adoption. It's just adopted by the legislative body directly. So,
So it'd be a separate document.
yeah.
Thanks for confirming.
Yep. All right, Sarah,
I'm
do you
happy
feel
to-
clear?
There's mud.
Okay.
One other thing, just to throw some more fuel into the fire, was in trying to dig through this. Kirsten and I have been getting the kitchen sink items so far, and there was a question brought up about presumptive towns. So towns that have can go through a process, whereas they can create findings regarding the Act 250 process, and the list for that. And so I think that just to bring it up and recognize, yes, the 1 intake 10 acre list. I think there was some effort earlier this year to update that and make sure it's as updated as possible and continue to update that. It was brought to our attention that a list of towns that have that presumptions should also be kept and made available as possible, but recognizing that the process that was sort of set up in statute is more sort of on a case by case basis. And so you could have a town that comes in with presumptions 2 years ago that might not necessarily have that now. So we're happy to try and help develop a list with caveats on the presumption towns too. So just wanted to recognize that and just thank some of our staff for the input on this too, in terms of trying to clean up all of our lists while we're at it in housekeeping.
Kirsten.
Yeah, I think also what we had discussed is when there's bandwidth, coming back with a process to have that a statewide list for those towns that have incorporated, that have a DRB and that have put into their bylaw local review under Act 250 Criterion 6, 7, and local plan conformance portion of Criterion 10, and that serve as a presumption under Act 250 Rule 19 for those specific criteria. So there isn't such a thing now, but it would be nice to have that at some point. I don't think this is like a high priority item, but it would be great to get to at some point. Okay,
Kirsten, you're saying that we don't currently have a list?
I'm not aware of a list,
Okay.
no.
Do
It's kind of
you,
handled at a district level or, you know, there,
Uh-huh.
as I understand it, a small number of towns. For
Yeah, that's
example,
what
in
I was gonna
D7,
ask.
there's one, Newport City.
Uh-huh.
So people kind of know which ones they are, but if you don't know, you know,
Yeah,
it would be
okay.
great to have that publicly facing as well as a compilation statewide and a
Yeah.
process for how that occurs.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
noted that, yeah, I think 24 BSA prescribes that the municipality is to have adopted the municipal APAs, for example, is one of the details. Like it's fairly spelled out what is to be in place for that.
So just to further build on that is our Rule 19L does contain how we handle these rebuttable presumptions. But Title 24, Section 4420 provides municipalities with the ability to make findings under some of the Act 250 criteria. That doesn't give us the same rule that we have in 1 in 10 acre towns. So it's not that we necessarily need to approve a municipality doing the presumptions. To Kirsten's point, I think what Kirsten's asking for might need a legislative fix. That might be worthwhile a deep dive at some point, but for right now, I think we can just clean up the list.
What do you think the legislative fix would be?
Yeah,
That's
I'm not,
needed?
I'm not saying that I'm recommending one. I'm just saying that the 1 in 10 acre process, we have the ability in Act 250 to sort of grant or somehow review. And with the
I'm sure we
rebuttal
do.
presumptions, it's more on a case by case basis with the actual Act 250 application. It's not, we don't have an application, and I don't think we could have an application for rebuttable presumption towns the same way that we do with 1 in 10 acre, if that makes sense.
I think we need to clarify some of this
Yeah.
with legal counsel. Because I don't necessarily see that
So
in my
this
read
was,
of the 1 acre, 10 acre. But somebody, I don't know if it was Maddie or Thomas, had their hand up and now it's down.
Yeah, no comment.
I did have my hand up and I asked Maddie to withdraw.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank you,
no
Thomas.
comment.
Okay, thanks. So let's give Sarah her marching orders to revise that form. And I think we can ask for a little bit of legal assessment of this as well at some point.
I think what I put in the memo was not a priority. I think just updating the list for now will suffice, but at some point, I think when we do our rule cleanup, this should all go through legal and
Yeah,
could benefit from a good housekeeping.
yeah. It might be just as we're keeping or maintaining a list of legislative fixes, maybe we should maintain a list of rule fixes or rule review. So that, 6 months from now, we're not, did we say we were going to look at Rule 2D or not? Kirsten thinks it looks great,
well,
but some of
well,
us
yeah,
are a little...
just to, you know, conceptually, and I haven't looked at it with a fine tooth comb, but I would just say with respect to the municipal presumptions, I'm not currently aware of any element of the rule or the statute that I would say, oh, I think this needs to be adjusted or.
Yeah,
So what we were flagging was just that we don't have a statewide list to inform everyone. Here's the
right.
status. And it is one of these sort of funny things in that frankly, like the applicants can either go to the town and get findings from the DRB under those, 2.5 criteria, or they can come to Act 250 and have the commission grant findings. So.
Okay. Shall we move on to the road construction jurisdiction conversation? Okay, let's do. Sarah
I'm
or
happy to-
Kirsten?
take it and then have Kirsten jump in.
Okay,
Let me share the memo. So I think we already had some preliminary discussion as a board regarding this, and let me zoom in a little bit on this one too. And the discussion, just to recap, I think from last week, was to perhaps have guidance as opposed to a rule. I think that's something that we want to make sure legally, we have a chance to have that reviewed by our team, just before we start going in any direction particularly. But Kirsten and I both feel that we could create guidance given the specificity of statute, and that a rule, particularly since this is not in effect until July 1st of 2026, might not be necessary at this time. And guidance will allow us a bit more flexibility, to address some of the areas that might want to have a bit more detail in terms of how it's going to be applied. So with that being said, we would like to look at creating guidance, which does not necessarily have a stakeholder requirement, but again, trying to draw from our existing stakeholders, recognizing stakeholder fatigue at this point, as well as our existing staff. And so some of the things that we just were brainstorming on that we could try and address a bit more with guidance, are what you see listed, and also provide, I think we talked about last week, illustrations about construction triggers, about this triggers, but this does not. We would try and have this draft guidance put together for the first of the year, and also have a very broad public comment period as well. So hopefully we aimed for, I think, the end of February, Kirsten, to try and have the guidance stood up well in advance of both the spring construction season and also the July 1st enaction of the new road. So just, this is what our thinking is on the methodology, and looking for board input more formally on this before we start to move forward. I'm happy to leave this up here, stop sharing so I can see people's faces more, but
Kirsten.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to flag, thanks, Sarah, that Sarah and I had a really helpful meeting about this and started to think about it in this way. In terms of like item 5, listing some specific areas to be, contemplated for development of additional detail within a guidance document. This is very preliminary, and so in my mind, there's very likely to be a more lengthy, comprehensive list of details that will be, I think, helpful to just sort of spell out, and with illustrations similar to how we have these schematics within the lot counting guidance, but probably a little bit more illustrative, I guess. So I guess I just kind of wanted to emphasize, we started getting into it in terms of looking at the different elements and a process to advance this. But it's by no means sort of comprehensive at this point. I guess I just kind of wanted to underscore that. But welcome, of course, input and thoughts, and anyone who's found time to read through the existing elements of the statute, which are quite prescriptive in many respects. So
I think Kirsten and I had both talked about one of our first things that we'd like to tackle after this is to set up a time with our executive director, to go to a district coordinators meeting and solicit their input and their thoughts and just generally get them thinking about it. And so that would be, again, just some initial conversation starters, I think is what 5 was intended to be. But recognizing that there are probably some other great ideas out there.
Or questions that people have. You know, that people may have hypotheticals in mind that they want to make sure it's understood how it will work.
You have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the timeline of this, and I mean, if some of these items on number 5, could be real rabbit holes. So I'm just curious, if the trigger is in July of next year, this seems a little rushed. If we're really going to be getting into these other issues, I don't know, it seems a little bit fast to me. I'd be happy to dig in. I have familiarity with these other areas of the law, but that deadline's a little tight with the appeal study and, due in November. Might have a little bit more capacity if we pushed it off a couple months and still could get it implemented before July, the guidance.
Well,
I think-
what was it you wanted to see done by the February? Public comment period, when would that be? End of February?
So
No.
Oh, I
we-
see.
We
Yeah,
were,
so-
yeah, oh, go ahead.
so you would want the board adoption by the end of February with this proposed timeline, and Brooke is suggesting moving it out a
Yeah.
couple more months. I
Well,
would be all right with that.
if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would too, I guess with the caveat that, and I agree, Brooke, it's an ambitious schedule, particularly given everything else that's going on. We were trying to get this out there for everyone's benefit before, March rolls around. Like March is kind of, can be really, really busy with everyone gearing up for spring construction projects and planning. And, we're just trying to be out ahead of the July 1st enactment date. So maybe we could, still have an earlier date as a goal. But recognize that obviously if there is going to be anything put in place, it would ideally need to be in place at least before July 1st, in my mind. Not necessarily, but in my mind, this is sort of to hopefully reduce frustration that might otherwise occur. So
And
I'm not opposed to pushing out the date, but that was the rationale.
And I'm just not exactly sure what it is in these categories that you want to talk about defining municipal roads. So I'm sort of running blind, just reacting to it. But no, I totally appreciate the construction season and planning. That's really important too.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is that we have public input, because this is a big deal. So, as long as we can get the public input that we need to get before the board adopts, do Kirsten and Sarah feel like we have time to do that by
I think-
the end of February?
I apologize when I'm presenting, I can't raise my hand. I haven't figured that out yet, how to
okay.
adequately take it up and put it down. But I'll just jump in and say, well, let us try. I think let us try and pull this together with the deadline. And if we get to January and the public input is significant that we have more work to do, all right, fantastic. We'll look to take additional time and make sure that we address concerns. But I think, to Kirsten's point, we had sort of worked backwards from the end of February and seeing what we could do. And so I think we both thought that this would be feasible. To Brick's concern, it might be, and this was just conversation starters, municipal roads, not really well defined necessarily in Act 1A1, but there's a whole lot of other definition work in state statute that we might be able to orient ourselves to. So these are things that we're going to need to dig in on. But I think we wanted to just bring to you sort of this overall thought process first before we got started and too far out of the gate.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Kirsten?
Yeah, just maybe another mention of an element of the conversation that Sarah and I had, again, conceptually, and I'd be interested to know what board members think, is we were envisioning that maybe a good way to get stakeholder feedback would be to go out with a draft, like that this would be an iterative process with probably multiple drafts that get refined as this work proceeds. But that ultimately there would be, sort of like the final draft that's put out for full public comment towards the end of the process. And we were envisioning that, so we would ourselves come up with some form of proposal to just put it out there as an initial concept, and get the process going with interested stakeholders. So it's a little bit different than the work that has occurred with the defined stakeholder group, that as that has occurred, it's been, the stakeholder group itself, alongside the board, kind of advancing a direction. So this would be, giving them something to start with, or starting with something that we would develop, and then get feedback from stakeholders on. It was thought that maybe that would help move the process along to have a starting point.
Sounds good. Any comments on this topic before we move on from anybody in attendance? It appears not. So let me get back to my agenda. Brooke, it's yours. Appeals study discussion.
Oh, just one moment.
Yeah.
You got to me a lot earlier.
Yeah, I know. We're half hour ahead of schedule.
And to have it all on my screen.
Must be
and
that
ready.
Alex Weinhagen always holding us up. Or not.
Okay, so let's talk about the appeals study, because we are at a point where I've begun to draft sections of the report, background, and the process we're going through and all of that. But we need to come to some decisions about what board models to analyze, what components that we want in them, so that we can then move forward and determine what additional personnel or other resources that would be necessary, depending on what kind of appeals, if any, the board were going to take over as the adjudicator. So what I have done is I've looked through the statistics and I have distilled some of the numbers so that we can understand what kind of volumes that we're talking about. So let me just share my screen so that we can just get a sense of how many cases that would be required to be taken over. You see the shared screen all right?
Yes.
Should I make it bigger or is it readable?
No, it's good for me. Is how everybody else see it?
Yes.
Anybody
Hi.
not see it? Okay.
So we had the last 3 years of data from the environmental division, and then they broke them down for us because their normal reporting statistics are combined, like ANR and Act 250 was combined, that kind of thing. So what we did was we teased out the actual caseload under the different categories. And then I did an average because the numbers are very, very consistent. There are no outliers that would skew the numbers or anything. And so just looking at the total averages of how many cases come through. What I did was, just so that you're aware, we have considered the notion of taking Act 250 appeals and maybe considering housing appeals, Tier 1A appeals, something of that notion, to see if we can address the housing crisis, get those cases through more quickly, alleviate the caseload of the environmental division. So this is sort of like a what components, what parts of the system could we and would we consider taking on as an appellate body? So just to be clear, we have like a third of the municipal appeals from zoning are housing related. So what we're talking about is not encompassing all of the appeals. What we're talking about, the total number. We're talking about Act 250. If we were to take that over as the appellate board, it would be about 14 on average cases per year. And it breaks down between permitting, which are more resource intensive to adjudicate, versus JOs. And then in the municipal arena, we're looking at about 19 de novo reviews per year. And then on the record review, municipalities is about an average of 3 per year for a total of 22. So I wanted to try to give you a volume context. And now remember that if we were to take on any of the Act 250 permitting, we would no longer be a party to the litigation before the environmental division. But we would still be there for our enforcement cases. And if you want to see how many enforcement versus this, we can look back at those as well. But I thought that this was probably the most important information for the conversation today. The other things that I want to just, yeah. Sure.
Is the bottom table those are averages per year or for the 3-year period?
For the 3-year period, it's just these numbers averaged in their categories. So for example, 8 for Act 250 permitting, it was 8, 10, and 8. It averaged to 9.
Okay, so that is though a yearly, yes, in the end, average. Yeah.
And the good thing is it has been very consistent. There have been a couple differences, but really it's very consistent. Now, of course, that's not the future because things are going to change, but at least this gives us some grounding initially. So if we were, remember, so we would be giving up being a party to 14 cases, and then we would become the tribunal, which is a bigger job, frankly. And now, but it's also important to understand the difference between what job we would doing, what role we would play, and that's also dependent on the type of review. So, for example, and I talked with Jenny briefly about this, but the idea of a JO being a de novo review really doesn't make sense to me. Because it is dependent upon the facts that are provided when the decision maker makes that decision. So instead of starting over and saying, oh, here's more information, we want you to decide differently. I think it would be very useful to lock that down to an on-the-record review. Unless there were manifest injustice, like there was false information, maybe if you wanted some kind of escape valve. But what was explained in Judge Walsh's recent JO decision was that the JO is only as good as the information that it's dependent upon. So if someone decides to do Project X, okay, and jurisdiction would attach if they go forward and do that. Well, maybe they don't want to do that. They decide to go do Project Y instead. And so long as Project Y is different than Project X in some material way, they're not handcuffed to Act 250 jurisdiction. So I strongly recommend that if we were going to take the JO appeals, that we do it on the record. There's no hearings. It would be a process of allowing people to write an appeal brief if they wished, or have an oral argument, even to request a site visit. And those three things are patterned precisely after the Public Utility Commission. They get the recommendation, they have to actually make the decision, it's not an appeal. And they then make their determination, and then that goes to the Vermont Supreme Court on appeal. And we would be suggesting the same, and this is from the models that have been proposed to us by the stakeholders. Sarah?
So of the Act 250 permitting appeals, do we have an idea of how many are major?
I can get that. Yeah, I can get that in a few minutes. I can't right this second. I don't want to spend time finding the right document. But we
Understood.
do. Yeah,
think
we
it
do
goes to
have
the-
that. It's a small number. My recollection is like 3, 4. I don't know if Jenny has a specific notion to put her on the spot.
Sarah, are you referring to permits that went through the major minor process, like had a hearing versus didn't have a hearing?
Correct. So out of, let's take the first line, the Act 250 permitting cases filed in 2023, there were 10. How many of those actually had a hearing and were considered major applications that then were subsequently appealed?
I believe, I would say, I mean, it should be all of them unless there was a permit appeal from the denial of party status on a minor. Because
You can't appeal a
and-
minor.
you can't appeal a minor, but people, and what would trigger a major if it had been deemed to be eligible for minor would be if someone requested party status, and then it would get a hearing, and then it would be major. So functionally, I think we did have 1 or 2 appeals of, at least in my recollection, in the last few years, of cases where people were denied party status and a hearing on the minor, but that was what the issue was.
Because, thank you.
Sorry.
No, I
It's sort of
very much
circular.
appreciate it. Sorry, I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot, but just, so I think what Brooke was just discussing about, having jurisdictional opinions be on the record. There's also discussion within the stakeholders group about having, Act 250 majors also be on the record and giving that sort of deference to those permits as well. So just to bring that up.
Yeah, and there's also been discussion about a hybrid where there's a bit of an escape valve in terms of particularly for neighbors who may find out about the district commission hearing right before it's convening. And of course, the developers had, however long they would want, a year or 2, whatever, to develop a project. And so the question becomes, is there a need to allow them to, hire an expert because they didn't have time to get one before the district commission hearing, something like that. So the notion of hybrid was, there are a couple different versions of it. one very expansive, let anything new through the, not quite de novo, but if you have any good reason, let it come in. All the way to manifest injustice or a real just cause provision. And there are other ways to also shut it down to some extent. You could say if expert witnesses, only expert witnesses can come in. You can't bring the whole neighborhood in the second time around, so there are different ways to nuance that, I think. But ultimately, or in the first instance, I think we need to determine on not just the JOs, but then on the permitting. Do we lock it down to the district commission? Or do we allow, I didn't know about it. I went to the hearing. I didn't have time to call Les Blumberg to be our sound expert. We'd like him to come in for the hearing. Guys have thoughts on that?
I think hybrid is a good idea. I mean, anything but de novo. I just think it's a good idea to give some weight to the original decision.
Kirsten?
Yeah, I agree. I think I've maybe said this once before, but conceptually, it makes sense to me that you would, on an appeal, start by examining the record below. And maybe that's in some cases sufficient, but have the ability to add to it, like as Janet said, kind of a hybrid. So like conceptually, that makes sense to me. That you would at least at a minimum start with the record below.
And what do you mean by that, though? Can you explain, Kirsten, what do you mean, like to supplement? In what circumstances or with what type of information?
I'm not sure what that standard should be, but I think there can be circumstances where it would make sense to have additional information put into the record.
Kirsten, what about Brooke's examples that she gave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it should be so strict that it's like the highest just cause standard where it's really the rare exception that ultimately sort of prescribes that it's almost like this on the record standard. The reason I say what I'm saying is because I think that applicants, participants, they're not always necessarily coming into the commissions with, their A game and all of the information that's relevant, knowing, maybe they know there's a contested issue and they're just going to have that occur on appeal. And so you're going through all this earlier process and then it gets, for all intents and purposes, just, in some respects set aside and repeated. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I think that the municipal bodies and the district commissions that go through, that deliberative process and render a decision based on the record and all the facts and evidence, I think should be given some weight. I think my understanding is, it does, but I think that all like the information that body looked at to reach their decision should be the starting point for what happens next.
Yeah, the starting point, I'm still unclear as to what that means because here's my thought about it. So I've only seen like at the PUC, I've seen one time where the PUC said, hey, we need some more information. It was from a regional planning commission where they get due consideration of their opinions, whatever. And so they wanted to understand, they did not understand what position that the Regional Planning Commission was taking. So that is the only time I've seen like the PUC say, hey, the record's not complete. We can't decide this thing because we don't have this piece, we don't understand what this is. Please clarify. But what I'm envisioning, okay, there would be jurisdiction to do that if it were necessary. I think it would be very uncommon for something like that to happen. Because to me, we sit as a permitting authority at the district commission. And what people bring to us, that's what we decide upon. We're not in the business of saying, hey, go get us this, go get us that. At least, I don't think certainly at an appellate level. I'm not saying that there aren't issues of completeness for a complete application, but there's a line of demarcation between what is burden of production versus your burden of persuasion. So for example, the district coordinator isn't going to say, oh, you don't have a sound study, you better go call somebody and get that, because that's up to the applicant whether or not they choose to put that in. So what I'm envisioning in an appellate level after Act 250, if it's not de novo, is some kind of showing that says we didn't put it in below because, and in fairness, we should be given the opportunity. So, like I'm saying, can't bring 20 neighbors in, 20 fact witnesses to all say, hey, it's too loud, but you can hire the sound expert and confine it to evidence that is, I don't know how to describe it, assisting the tribunal with credible information from an expert, that kind of thing.
Kirsten, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to offer that certainly the district commissions do, through the application major review process, identify additional items that are relevant and necessary for them to complete their review. They may, for instance, prescribe that the applicant develop and submit a supplemental landscaping plan to buffer aesthetic impacts or make some other adjustment to the project design, or just identify what the issue is and then prescribe that the applicant is to return with some form of supplemental proposal. So I think some of that does happen at the district commission level in terms of 250.
Which I think
and
is
I-
fine. That's the
yeah.
fact gathering performance of their obligations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to play off of that point. So the difference here is we don't want to do that. We don't want to be the fact gathering. We want all of the information to already be prepackaged for our decision. And if there is some need or some desire by somebody who didn't have an opportunity, that's when you get an exception to the record to put something else in. So that's kind of the line of demarcation I think we need if we're going to make this a faster process without hearings on new evidence. We have to be cautious about what is the on the record, what's the plus part of it.
So Brooke, for the example you gave was neighbors who didn't have time to engage a sound expert. How would how would we define didn't have time to? You know what I mean? The one, and I think you gave another example, which was a neighbor who didn't have time to make the hearing, or didn't have enough notice to make the hearing. And to me, the hearing notice requirements are what they are in statute. And if there was no error by the district staff in terms of notifying people, we can't have people coming in and say, well, I didn't have time to go to the hearing, or I didn't get, my mail didn't come until the day before and I just couldn't make it. If the statutory hearing notice requirements were met, I don't think we can be, unless there was a mistake, I don't think we can be allowing people to come in at that point. But in terms of hiring an expert to rebut an applicant's sound analysis, you know, I would think that if they wanted that, they would have asked for it in front of the commission. Like, couldn't they do that, Kirsten? We need time to look at this with our own expert. Can the and the commission
Sure.
would
And
recess?
there is a provision currently that applies to any denial whereby the applicant can, and I've only myself seen it used once, firsthand, but that if there's a denial and then the applicant has a set amount of time, I think it's 6 months, to return to the district commission with additional information to address the deficiency and the basis of application denial. So there is this safety valve at the district commission level that governs denials,
Right.
where the district commission itself can, and it's not just, you can ask the applicant to reconsider some element of a decision that you think is not incorrect. If you're a participant, you can come in and say, you can't submit new evidence, but you can come in and say, we think you got this wrong and here's why, and you can ask the commission to reconsider, and that process is, happens within 30 days. And then there's a more extended period of time that governs a permit denial where the applicant can return. So
maybe
so
that
there is,
can
yeah.
be a model for this. Those existing guidelines or are they rules?
I think it's in statute. I apologize. I'd
Oh,
have
it's
to
in
actually
statute?
look that up. It might be
Yeah.
rule, but I think it's in, I would have to look it up.
I think it is a rule.
Yeah, so maybe, maybe that's
But
how
that comes
we
to
can look
mind.
at
I mean,
this. Yeah,
yeah, it's sort of like maybe, I don't know, things happened quicker than people were envisioning would occur, and you have this set amount of time to come back in, and so
Right.
I'm not really sure.
Andy, I think you got this wrong, and here's why. Those rules around that could
Well,
help
yeah, I
us
mean,
here.
the commission reconsideration is already embedded in the process and can occur. And then once a decision, and you can only do that once, and once that occurs, then it's a final decision that
Right,
can
but
be
that's
appealed.
that's for the applicant, right? If this were some
No,
neighbors who,
a party can ask for
any party.
reconsideration.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
I don't know, then maybe it
talking
should
about-
be on the record.
The reconsideration thing, the 6-month reconsideration can be the non-applicant. I didn't realize that.
So there's two different things. There's the initial reconsideration of the decision, and then there's, for the specific case of a denial, the applicant can sort of reapply. And I think there's some special provisions, and I can try to find it right now, but you don't pay the fee again. You don't resubmit everything. You just from memory, you just file new information that addresses the basis of denial so that the commission can consider if now the project qualifies for a permit. If all of the criteria are met such that a permit would be granted.
Right.
Sarah?
So you're talking about two different things, the
Yeah.
28-day reconsideration and then 6-month permit fee or denial permit.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sarah?
So I just want to be cognizant of spending a lot of time on the exceptions that may or may not occur very infrequently. And I think it might be too hard to attempt to do in a cohesive and thoughtful way that encompasses all this. And so I think just in terms of giving Brooke some feedback is if we have to make a decision one way or another, either to go with on the record or not, because creating different exceptions might be too cumbersome and hard to do well, is I'd be more for let's just go with on the record then. And I think from what Kirsten's been describing, there are so many other thoughtful ways in terms of reconsideration actually at the district commission level before it would even get to an appeals process. I think just the more that I listen to Kirsten explaining all those processes, I feel confident that maybe just going with on the record for an actual appeal might be the way to go.
Yeah, the one thing about a reconsideration though, keep in mind, it's like, you can't put new evidence in the way that it's structured presently. So that maybe that's the place to put a little wiggle room, because all
New
you can
evidence.
argue on, yeah, all you can argue is like, you got it wrong, you didn't understand it, or facts are misunderstood, something like that.
Yeah. That's my
So-
understanding of the 30-day reconsideration,
Yeah.
but I
yeah.
think, and it's 6087 C that prescribes that a person may within 6 months apply for reconsideration of his or her permit, which application shall include an affidavit to the district commission and all parties of record that the deficiencies have been corrected. And then the district commission is to hold a new hearing upon 25 days notice to the parties. I'm just, when we're talking about like what standard might govern, when and how you supplement the record below, these are some of the things that kind of come to mind, that these provisions where this kind of thing can in some cases occur. I do think that it's the denial and the reapplication within 6 months. I think you can, I'm not aware of any reason why you can't submit new information. I think for let's just make a hypothetical. Landscaping plan inadequate and the applicant refuses to modify it and the commission denies for that reason. And then, they think upon it further and 3 months later, they decide to enhance a landscape plan and come back to the commission with the revised landscaping plan, which now the commission deems satisfactory and decides to approve the project. And that's just a bit complete
Right, I mean,
hypothetical, but
fixing the deficiencies means that
Yeah.
you've changed the plan, so.
yes, I
Yeah.
think you would have to be able to accept new evidence in that circumstance. And that's, like I said, I've seen this myself firsthand in a very limited basis, but that's what occurred, was new information
yeah.
filed.
Totally get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just talking about the normal 30-day or
30-day,
20-day reconsideration. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're definitely on the record on JOs. Everyone's okay with that?
I'm good with that.
And permitting, we're leaning towards on the record, but let's move
Mm-hmm.
on this plus portion
Yep.
of it. What enhancement on the record? Because what I do want to also talk about are the housing appeals. What if anything can we do? And let me share my screen again. Because obviously this is the crisis that we want to try to assist to alleviate. The number of appeals in that arena is about 20, 22, 20 to 25 arena. And if we were to take on Act 250 from a capacity standpoint, even though we're giving up the litigation part of that, it's more intense, obviously. So we may need another attorney for that task, because we're probably only losing maybe half an attorney of that, of amount of work that we would be giving up.
So, Brooke,
And then, yeah.
Are we including, the fact that we have 5 full-time board members that can do some of this work, in that calculation?
Yeah, what I was saying, I'm not saying that we have to have a new lawyer, and we need to figure out the roles for sure of
Mhm.
what we would be doing, what the lawyers would be doing. Would they be reviewing our decisions, that kind of thing. But regardless, I think, maybe it's half an attorney, if that we're giving up of, or, I don't want to assume, oh gosh, we're just changing to a different function and it's equal, because the new function for our lawyer, no matter what, is going to be more intense, I think, or more time consuming than what the current, than being a party's attorney is. Because you're dealing with both sides and then obviously making a decision. So I just want to be very careful not to underestimate, where we are now versus where we need to go because of all of the other regional planning reviews and all of that. So, and we're putting the resource issues aside to some extent, because we're still working on gathering that information. And this conversation really needs to be able to dictate to Rachel, okay, these are the factors that we're considering, and so that we can convert that into what resources are really needed on the ground. But what I want to focus on is general capacity to understand, all right, we're talking about more than doubling the caseload of this tribunal if we were just to take housing appeals. Is there a subset of housing appeals that we could focus on? The priority housing, things that happened in Tier 1A. Janet, you were kind of throwing around some ideas.
Yeah, I was thinking Tier 1A and B. And I don't know
It's
how
hard to
many
know
of
how
those
many have been
housing.
there.
Right, and I don't, yeah, so. Sarah and I are going to be collecting some very rough estimations from the RPCs in terms of how many of their municipalities will be seeking Tier 1A and Tier 1B status. Because we need that to develop our fiscal year 27 budget. And it might be helpful to pass that information along to you if we're going to consider taking appeals from Tier 1A and B, and maybe only housing appeals from those areas. Kirsten.
Oh, just going to quickly say, I think that's really great and relevant information. Brooke and I have been talking about, well, we're, 5-member full-time board. Of course, we ourselves have capacity. But what does that look like looking ahead? And so I've been asking Sarah, and I had a conversation with Alex around, what are you guys hearing? How many of these might we receive in terms of 1As, et cetera? I mean, we know we've got the 11 RPCs that will take us through, the end of 26. We'll be busy with all that. But then how many, plan adjustments might we see? Like, I think this is all good information.
Oh, a big unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But-
it seems like that, at least from some RPCs, that we may see less Tier 1A and Tier 1B opting in than we might have imagined.
And maybe over time that will ramp up, like we,
Right.
we don't.
Right.
In the appeal study, we've even heard some mention that there are some municipalities not wanting to elect to become Tier 1A because of the enforcement of Act 250 obligations.
Hmm.
That was talked about. So
I think, just to throw it out there, is I think that the more that we can use the Tier 1s as vessels, I like the idea of also looking at priority housing projects. I think that can help us narrow the focus a bit more. And I think that will also help us as a board recognizing our limited resources, because these are towns that we've gone through and we've reviewed as having
Yeah.
robust processes.
Yeah.
As are the towns that are doing priority housing work. And I think the ones that then are left on the list in terms of housing, I would hope that we're going to be addressing the bulk of any future appeals by doing that. And you would whittle it down to the other towns that maybe haven't gone through and had that sort of robust process in place and that community dialogue as being the ones that then maybe have a different process, but it's maybe a longer process, but maybe that's more deserving because they haven't done all the planning and all the community dialogue that these other towns have for tier ones or priority housing.
In terms of the municipal appeals, they're on the record and most are de novo. And I just want you to be thinking about the notion that conducting hearings is a very different task and requires different resources than doing on the record appeals. Obviously, you have to hold hearings. Well, usually you hold hearings unless it's pre-filed testimony and everything is done on papers except for cross-examination. But there was a lot of talk about whether or not municipal appeals could all be on the record in the future. And there was a lot of pushback about being able to preserve the record, getting transcribers to be able to create that record. That was met with practical responses, not only the notion that the APA, we won't have to necessarily require strict transcripts. We can use video recordings, that kind of thing. But also the fact that there was no one who could create these transcripts, and therefore it was too much of a burden on the towns to package up all this information, because they're not subject to all of the same open meeting law requirements that we are, for example. So there was a real mixed bag about whether or not on the record review could be utilized in the municipal context as a result of these logistical challenges. And then, of course, the notion that these smaller municipalities may not be as sophisticated. People don't necessarily come up for an on-the-record review kind of notions. So there was an awful lot of conversation about that. Janet?
They are subject to open meeting law. The only thing that isn't is a deliberative session, a closed deliberative session. So they must produce minutes, they must produce a recording, they must have a hybrid meeting, all of that. So the only cases in which that might be, there might be some very small rural towns that are exempted because they just don't have capacity. But I don't think that we're going to be getting tier 1A applications from those towns, and maybe not even tier 1B. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes any difference, but yeah.
I thought that there was some difference, like they don't have to record it, they only have to like make it available or something. No, they have to still keep the recording and.
Yep.
Okay. And the other thing is that with AI, I mean, we're finding transcripts are really accurate. They have to be checked, but
yeah.
So that's a whole nother argument that really hasn't been talked about because I think it's so new. But what about those neighbors, again, in the municipal context who don't know about it until the
They
night
do know,
before,
though. They're required that all abutting landowners get notice of all hearings, and they need to show up. If they don't show up, then that's their fault.
They can put it
So-
in writing as well. There are other mechanisms to.
Yeah,
quote
yeah.
unquote, participate.
Yeah.
Kirsten?
Just a quick ask, is anyone else having an issue with their screen freezing up a couple times in the last 2 minutes? No? Okay,
No,
well, it happened on me, so maybe
You want to
hopefully it
see
will.
video? If you turn your video off, maybe
Yeah,
you'll have a better connection.
well, I'll stay on for another moment to share. In terms of what I'm interpreting as one concept of separating out housing projects or possibly a subset of housing projects, like those located in tier 1A or 1B, or those housing projects which are priority housing projects. My thought would be treat all housing projects the same, like just all housing is important and treat them all the same. And I also think, it's going to be back to the same debate of court versus board hearing appeals. And I think it just gets clumsy to try to break things up. And I would just send all housing projects to the same system. I'm gonna turn off. I'll turn off my video if it happens again. And then you'll know.
Okay.
Another option that was suggested was to allow the applicant, no one else, if you were going to say priority housing or whatever comes to the board, it would also give them the option to bring their zoning case to the board if they wanted to, or vice versa, if they wanted consolidation of zoning in Act 250 and even A&R. Maybe wherever we tell them they have to go, they have the option to go the other place, or at least if you're coming, I don't know, if you're
Yeah.
coming to the LURB on Act 250, you have the right to bring your zoning case in,
Yeah.
as opposed to sending Act 250 over to the court.
Right. Or vice versa.
Or both.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah, thoughts? And while Sarah's thinking, Brooke, have you had any of these conversations with Alex? I'd like Alex to weigh in too before you run with it. So,
Yeah, we're planning on meeting again next Monday on it, but this is a
Okay.
good start for me, because, once I looked at the numbers this weekend, I'll tell you my thoughts on it just from a conceptual standpoint of building another, an appeals body system. If we're going to do Act 250, which are, fairly small numbers in the scheme of things, 15 say, then why not build the system so that we could alleviate the housing cases as well? And make them on the record, no matter where they come from, to speed things up. Because we have a housing crisis and there's a really good reason, and it gets a little different treatment in the administrative setting as opposed to court. But otherwise, I think trying to do just the Act 2, I think there's nothing wrong with doing the Act 250 appeals. I think our program should be doing. It's a very good reason for us to be doing that again. And if that is the best way forward on Act 250, it makes sense to me to bring some of the docket over so that then the court is better able and better resourced to work on their normal docket.
yeah. Sarah.
I think Brooke actually just expressed that very well. I was going for the rising tide lifts all boats or something of that nature. If we have the ability to peel off some and also create some more capacity within the court system. I think that might be a good place to start. Unwinding the municipal side is more complex. And to me, that might be a phase two, versus let's start with something that has a nexus in sort of the overall purpose in terms of trying to expedite and resolution to housing, with those tier one priority housing, particularly that's maybe one to add in that hasn't been touched on in the last 5 minutes. In terms of municipal, that's not a tier one. I think also adding priority housing projects into that might be something to look at a little bit more finer, but solving the larger municipal at this time, there's a lot more to that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Just from what Sarah just said, it occurred to me that there are a lot of municipal housing permits that are issued that are just for single family, and now duplexes also get the same almost administrative review. And I wonder if what we should be concerned with are just the multi-family projects and, you know, the 4-lot subdivision in a rural town that is just going to have 4 single-family homes. Does an appeal of that really need to come on a quicker docket? Is that going to help our housing crisis to give that one to us? You know, unless it somehow triggered Act 250 through different means, why should it come to us? So thinking about, I mean, Kirsten, I know you just suggested that you'd like to see all housing treated the same, but if the purpose of this is to alleviate the pressure and the impediments to our housing development, you know, to alleviate this crisis that we're in, maybe, oh, there we go.
Now,
On
this is only Act 250.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I don't have municipal types of housing broken down like Jenny did for our Act 250 stuff. But assuming that a priority housing project is probably big enough to need Act 250, yeah, there haven't been many. So I'm not sure and we can go back into the 3 years and figure out which ones are priority housing or multifamily or whatever on the zoning cases. I do have the docket numbers, but I would assume it's probably, well, it's got to be a small third or less, I would guess. I don't know. And
that
then it's like, is it too small a number to bother coming?
You know, maybe not in the first year or two when we're still trying to approve all these plans and, you know, everybody's sort of, you know, figuring this out. And as the, you know, the tiers start, the tier ones start coming into being, I don't know.
The
Kirsten.
magic 8 ball knows.
Oh, the magic 8 ball. What's it say?
Well, let's see.
Kirsten, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I understand what, Jenna, what you're saying about, you know, a small number of house lots in a rural area in the grand scheme of like the sum total of housing. But in my mind, you know, in rural Vermont, a 5-lot subdivision is sort of has the equivalency, so to speak, of like 100 units of housing in Chittenden County. So I feel like it's all important and relevant to the topic of addressing the important need for housing. So Rachel's
Rachel,
maybe
go
got some
ahead.
info.
I finish your thought, Kirsten. I had a question about something else entirely.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, again, like housing's housing, so every unit matters kind of thing. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
I'm sorry if this is out of turn. Brooke, I may have missed this in your introduction to this subject, but where did the concept of treating housing or priority housing projects differently on appeal, where was the genesis of that idea? Was that from a stakeholder meeting or?
The statutory charge asks us to focus on housing appeals as one of the elements to look at and determine if we can provide relief so that permitting goes more smoothly and quickly for those. So it's been a topic, obviously, in the stakeholder process during the discussions. And there are several housing folks, nonprofit, for-profit, who are all extremely concerned about this, because one of the issues is that even though we don't have big numbers to supposedly be concerned about, there is an awful lot of anecdotal information that is about Act 250 chilling the developers' desire to build housing because it's so time consuming, expensive, etc. So it's kind of at the heart of, one of the things we're trying to resolve through Act 181 is to improve housing. And if we can do something for the appeals process to speed things up, that's what we're trying to grapple with. And several of the housing advocates seem to be very interested in the board models and the notion that under the APA things could go more quickly because of eliminating discovery to a large extent, and even motion practice may not be as robust in the APA setting versus the court setting. So we're trying to solve the housing crisis, and this notion of, gee, there are such small numbers, why is this a crisis? It's because the numbers are small to some extent. People are not building because of the regulatory red tape.
Does that
Thanks,
answer your
Sam.
question, Rachel?
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of splitting up, any of the permitting. I think there is a good reason why they all go to the same place. And I don't mean for consolidation purposes. I think we have an excellent environmental division. The problem is it is too slow. There are too many opportunities to exercise your due process to the maximum extent, whereas we can curtail those timeframes in some significant ways under the APA.
And then there are other states who have done this to some degree. They've got a panel that looks at housing appeals separate from others because they want to prioritize housing.
Yeah, and last
Didn't
year
New
there were,
Hampshire?
New Hampshire has a housing board, and last session there was a housing, I've forgotten what they called it, but like the housing court proposal that circulated specifically for the appeals of all housing projects. And actually there are some sections of that legislation that I may be borrowing and utilizing because the Job Ledge Council did on a lot of the wording was really useful for us in trying to build board models or rules.
Yeah. Hey, Brooke, were there other topics you wanted to discuss today?
No,
that we haven't?
I think we're good because I would like Alex to rejoin the conversation.
Yeah.
But this gives me some good direction so that I can sort of formulate some ideas in terms of, okay, here is what might be a good model and have you next Monday be able to comment on more specifics. And because we need to establish what it is that we want Rachel to cost out and compare for us when it comes to actual resources and personnel.
Yes.
So that's helpful unless there's any other questions at this point, or if you want me to go through the dockets to look at how many, what type of housing appeals that there were coming out of the municipal arena. Maybe I could
That'd
look at
be
like
helpful.
if I
Yeah.
could look at like last year's. I think they're probably pretty consistent, and I think 50
Yeah.
dockets is enough to look up.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would
That'd be great if you could do that. Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, no,
Thanks.
it's 22 something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get that and I'll circulate that as soon as I can categorize the information.
Okay, any questions or comments from anybody in attendance on this topic today? Okay, seeing no hands go up, hearing no utterances. Let's move on to item J, discussion and possible action on appeals and enforcement. Do I have a motion? Brooke?
I'm bringing up Maddie's email for the script. Okay. The board needs to discuss pending and probable Act 250 appeals and enforcement actions and to have confidential attorney-client communications on these matters. Therefore, I move that we find that premature public knowledge of these matters would place the board at a substantial disadvantage and move that the board enter executive session.
Thank you, Brooke.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That was 4 ayes from the 4 board members present. So we will go into executive session and return to this meeting to report any decisions out. And then our only remaining option or remaining agenda item is to adjourn. So you may stay if you wish, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Okay, we are returned. 4 board members here, and we are still recording according to the note on my screen. So we have nothing to report out from executive session. The only remaining item is
Make a
adjournment.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kirsten. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Brooke. Okay, any discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That is 4. That is all of us present. We are adjourned. Thank you, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie.
You're welcome. Have a good one.